with all of you. And as I just said in Eric's session, if you have questions for Zelda, please be kind enough just to type them in the chat section, and then we will extract those and email them to her for a response. Okay, so Arlene, as soon as you're able, please go ahead and share her recording. Thank you.
For matters relating to early childhood. Good morning, colleagues. I'm Zelda Adendorf from the Department of Higher Education and Training, and I'm responsible for matters relating to early childhood education in the Teacher Education Directorate. Now, our focus in this directorate is on policy development and teacher education and lecturer qualifications across all the subsectors of the education system. Actually, I should say, among others, our focus is on policy development for teachers and lecturers. My presentation will focus on the government's response to improving the quality of early childhood education provision in South Africa, bearing in mind that it is one part of the broader strategy to improve the quality of early childhood development services in general. And my presentation draws on the draft concept note, the Vision for Early Childhood Development, ECD, in South Africa, prepared by DBE and published in 2021 March. Looking at the presentation outline, I would like to start with a brief overview of some of the key policy documents that have laid the foundations for the inclusion of early childhood education in government's approach to ECD. Next, I will highlight some of the challenges identified in the sector in relation to the quality of early childhood education, which form the basis for government's response strategies. I will then discuss the vision for improved quality of early childhood education as set out in the draft concept note I mentioned, with a focus on early learning and development in relation to the function shift of ECD from Department of Social Development to the Department of Basic Education. The last part of the presentation will provide an overview of some of the activities that have been identified by DBE for successful transfer of the function of ECD. Now, the reason for the focus on the function shift is because this is key to achieving government's vision for ECE in South Africa. The presentation, I believe, will provide you with a snapshot of government's response to achieving quality ECE for all children in South Africa from a policy as well as a practice perspective. I believe this could assist SARIS in identifying strategies or strategic areas rather of research that are aligned to government's vision for ECE in South Africa by 2030. The next 3 slides consist of a table which show the important foundations that have been laid for the vision of universal access to quality ECD programs through the different policies that have been developed between 1994 and 2020. The importance of early childhood development as part of the post-apartheid education system in South Africa was articulated as early as 1994 in the Reconstruction and Development Program. The RDP policy framework was followed by several policy documents affecting ECD. All of them aim to improve the quality of ECD in South Africa. And I'm not going to go through those or the summary of the content with you. I'm sure you are familiar with these policies and their purpose. This slide covers the Education White Paper 5 on early childhood education, which of course provided for the reception here and expanded provision and building coherent and targeted intersectoral programs for children from birth to 4. Then I want to go down to the bottom of the slide to the National Early Learning and Development Standard, NELS, which which sets local standards on children's early learning and development outcomes to facilitate, among others, quality ECD programs. So the vision for universal access to quality ECCE programs will rely on the implementation of that NILS that I've just mentioned, as well as the South African National Curriculum Framework for Children Birth to 4, the National Integrated Early Childhood Development Policy, the ECD policy, also known as NIECD, and the policy on minimum requirements for programs leading to qualifications in higher education for ECD educators. So as I said, this concept note that I am speaking to relies heavily on the implementation of these policies in order to achieve better quality ECD provisioning. Let's move on to key challenges to quality ECD delivery. As early as 1996, the interim policy for early childhood development recognized the long history of discriminatory provision in the sector and suggests that the existing conditions in ECD make it difficult to provide a quick fix solution, and that the situation requires a set of immediate measures alongside carefully devised medium and long-term strategies that will provide a better foundation to address the fundamental need for ECD services. For this reason, the draft concept note sets out what should be achieved over the next 10 years, that is by 2030. The Education White Paper 5 on Early Childhood Education, Meeting the Challenges of Early Childhood Development in South Africa, published in 2001, provides an analysis of the nature and the context and the status of ECD provision in South Africa, and it suggests 5 key areas requiring attention. So this is the extent of ECD provision, the inequality in existing ECD provision, inequality of access to services, variable quality of services, and an incomplete, fragmented legislative and policy framework for ECD that results in uncoordinated service delivery. In 2012, the Department of Planning, Monitoring and Evaluation, the DPME, conducted a diagnostic review of the early childhood development sector that significantly shaped the recommendations put forward as part of the National Development Plan. And they identified reasons for poor quality of ECD services, particularly the poorly skilled workforce, the lack of appropriate early learning approaches, governance issues, and inadequate resourcing. And one of the central recommendations of this diagnostic review was the need for a decisive paradigm shift in the model for provisioning early childhood development programs in the country. Moving on to the National Development Plan, here we also have significant challenges and persistent challenges identified in early learning development and education. And you will see that there is a particular pattern running through these different documents with the same issues occurring and reoccurring. Quality of early learning and early childhood development programs, funding for infrastructure and staff, training for teachers and ECD practitioners, learner support material and equipment, reaching the most vulnerable children and families, and ensuring that departments responsible for different aspects of early childhood development work together. And very importantly, there was the recommendation that there should be a policy and program shift to ensure that the Department of Basic Education takes core responsibility for the provision and monitoring of ECD. And of course, in this respect, ECD refers to early childhood education and development. Moving on to the vision of universal access to quality in ECD in South Africa. Now, there are 5 strategies proposed for improving the quality of ECD. Government's focus at present is on the following 5 strategies that are proposed for improving the quality of ECD. Firstly, the curriculum-based early learning for all children birth to 5 is based on the first and central pillar that early childhood development programs will be part of the basic education system and will be informed by the NCF and by CAPS for the foundation phase. The implementation of NCF early learning programs will be supported by a quality assurance and monitoring system on a basic education continuum and will include early childhood development programs in the education management and information system, EMIS. So there'll be a lot closer monitoring and record keeping of the ECD programs that are being offered. Secondly, early childhood development programs for all children birth to 5 is based on the National Integrated Early Childhood Development Policy recommendation, which provides for a shift to the public provision of early childhood development services by government for all young children in South Africa, in partnership, of course, with the non-government and the private sector. The vision for universal access to quality ECD takes into consideration that caregivers, including parents, require a range of care for their children, with some requiring full day care and others not. So children, depending on their circumstances and their geographic location, require different approaches in the home and provision by third parties, whether government or non-government, for the developmental early learning. And in this regard, the proposed programs will be implemented through different modalities to ensure progress towards universal access for all children by 2030. So the program options will be center-based programs at facilities with fixed infrastructure, play groups, and home-based care. And these programs will be complemented and supported by intensive but flexible training of caregivers and those working in ECD centers and play groups and mobile ECD programs and toy libraries, so that children are reached where they are located geographically. Thirdly, this strategy for training and development for all those working in ECD is proposed, and I think it's recognized that there's a challenge in ECD in South Africa in the regarding the relatively low level of knowledge and skills and the lack of regulations of those responsible for the early learning and development of children aged birth to 5 years. So this impacts on early learning for children, but especially for the poorest and the most disadvantaged children. The proposal is that ECD is incorporated into the basic education system and that the ECD workforce is also integrated into the educator workforce. And this incorporation should ensure a clear career path for all those involved in ECD provision, with multiple flexible opportunities for training and developing, including recognition of prior learning. There are currently several registered qualifications in early childhood development available, starting from SAQA level 4 to level 7. The lower level qualifications are offered by resource and training organizations and TVET colleges for ECD practitioners. And then professional level qualifications are provided by higher education institutions. And according to the new policy for minimum requirements for programs leading to higher education qualifications, these will be the early childhood care and education qualifications. So in addition, there are also several skills programs and part qualifications that are also being implemented as part of more informal training or linked to continuous professional development accredited with SACE. The need for a more professional and recognized workforce in early childhood development will be included in the human resource strategy of the DBE, and it will include registration with SACE for ECD educators and practitioners. The DBE and the DHET have already made a substantial contribution to this planned improvement of the training and education and development for those working in ECD through the Human Resource Development Strategy, which was published in 2018, as well as the policy, which I've referred to earlier, for programs leading to qualifications in higher education. This puts in place a set of qualifications for ECD educators and practitioners who are delivering or assisting in delivering ECD programs, including formal curricula such as the NQF, the NCF, with guidelines for the programs that lead to such qualifications. The next strategy is a coordinated approach to the implementation of early childhood development programs. So it's recognized that effective early childhood development programs result from a series of mutually dependent partnerships of role players responsible for the well-being and development of children in South Africa. And this includes different government departments, organizations, agencies, and individuals. In fulfillment of its responsibilities, government will partner with all relevant role players, including development partners, non-government organizations, private entities, and the business sector. And then there will be a development of a comprehensive national strategy, which will ensure a properly resourced, coordinated, and managed ECD system as part of the National Basic Educational Strategy. The DBE will lead and strengthen coordination between departments, as well as the private non-profit sector. And finally, the strategy for a flexible funding and provisioning framework. Well, this is based on an underpinning principle that the funding of ECD requires that government leads and ensures that there is sufficient funding available to implement the National Integrated Early Childhood Development Policy. But it is, of course, clear that not all funds for the provision of ECD should or could be sourced from the public fiscus, but that private entities, corporates, and others contribute to the equitable provision in the country. I think that brings me to the end of the strategies, and I would like to now go on to the section which speaks to preparing for new functions. These are steps for the implementation of the ECD vision, and it focuses on the period between January 2021 and March 2022. So there are plans for an ECD census in partnership with the Lego Foundation, and the census is to be conducted on all ECD programs, and the plan is to have this done by the end of December 2021. The main purpose of the census will be to collect standardized information that can be used to develop a baseline EMIS database for ECD, which has been sorely lacking. A pilot was already conducted in 2021 June. Then there's the plan for early year index and baseline assessment. Nationally representative survey of the early learning and development outcomes in children aged 4 to 5 will be carried out. The index will monitor trends over time in the proportion of preschool children who are on track for age in key areas of development. A national strategy for ECD delivery will be developed in line with the function being the responsibility or becoming the responsibility of the Department of Basic Education. The development of a human resource development plan which is based on that approved human resource development strategy I've spoken about. And this will include the professionalization of the workforce and registration with SAFES. Development of a quality assurance and support system to monitor and support early learning programs to reach the minimum quality standards. Developing a model of funding for ECD programs, including ECD centers and other modalities. Developing a new system of infrastructure support for early childhood development programs and schools providing grade R and grade RR. And then integrate ECD programs into the EMIS system, which is going to be set up. Develop an implementation plan that will focus on delivering early childhood development programs, and develop a program for the provision of ECD programs with the Department of Human Settlements. Develop a streamlined registration framework and process with the Department of Health. This has been a rather contentious issue because the registration of ECD programs has been fraught with challenges. And the proposal is that it'll be one singular procedure based on national norms and standards that is clearly articulated and widely communicated with support from government. And most importantly, the requirements should be developmental in nature and set targets for compliance over a period of time. And then there will be an ECD audit, which entails a more in-depth questionnaire conducted in a nationally representative sample of early learning programs, with the aim of seeking detailed information on human resources, finances, learners, health and nutrition, etc. And finally, an organizational structure for effective coordination between different government departments and stakeholders, and it will be anchored in the DBE. That wasn't finally. Finally is to develop the necessary legislation as the primary piece of legislation for ECD, and to identify, review, and amend existing policies and legislation. And it is recommended that a moratorium will be placed on all current policy and legislative developments until this process has been concluded. So, ladies and gentlemen, I trust that this presentation will assist Saraisi in identifying strategic areas of research that are aligned to government's vision for ECD in South Africa by 2030. The focus is on the function shift at present because that is where the hopes are for, and the vision is for improving the quality of early childhood education, particularly in South Africa, leading to universal access of quality early childhood programs. And I thank you.
All right, ladies and gentlemen, although Zelda is obviously not here to answer our questions, I think it is appropriate for us just to open the floor for comment on what she has presented to us. So if anybody would like to comment, I think particularly in the light of what Jonathan Jansen was saying at the very beginning of today's proceedings about how important policy is and should we be focusing on policy when we do our research. Yeah, I think maybe let's look at it a little bit through that lens. So perhaps if colleagues would like to comment in any way. I have also just opened the chat. Hasina? You're muted.
Thank you very much. I thought I'll just set the ball rolling. I think that
Yes.
we are at a kind of a crossroads here. A lot is going on, and it is going on at such a rapid pace that you can't stop and think really where's the research agenda. It seems like the research agenda is tumbling out of the pressing need. So there's already the index study, there's the census, there's the call for a more compounded audit that is going on. So in this rapidly changing environment, what would be the role of the researchers from Sarisi would be a question that we could ask. And then the second thing that I'm picking up is that there is this kind of demarcation between in the qualifications, the professional qualifications are now seen as the university ambit, and skills training and everything below that is seen as contributory towards the professional level qualification. And I think that what we really need to do is to understand the context and how a disjointed career pathing is going to affect that. The other thing I think you should be very aware of is that there is tension between the NPOs and their perceptions of the universities. So it's perceived as if the universities are going to take over their work. And so I was in a forum last week where this idea was presented, and I responded by saying, do not idealize the ECD program in the university. It is a fight to get ECD into the qualification book, for example. If you look at an analysis, the big universities have not come to the party for the Bachelor of ECCE, for the Diploma of ECC. These are your so-called Ivy League universities. So the university is not a homogeneous space where we're just taking away business from the NPOs. So I just wanted to, and so I ended up in that forum saying that we are in this together. And we need, sorry about that, we need to make sure that we come together and we do the kinds of things that are necessary from the field. But for us as researchers, I really think that we need to hone into professionalization and the professionalism, and some work has begun on this, but it is really a substantive issue when you look at the training and the qualifications, but I'll stop there.
Thanks, Lucina. Thanks for that comment. I see Corrine is here as well. Corrine, let's hear your thoughts.
Thank you. I would just like to once again, um, as you may have gathered through the different conferences and forums and that we had on ECD, I'm all for the activism that Eric mentioned. And if I look at the slides, it was the second last slide of the presentation. There was a date given, I think it was say October 2021 till May 2022. Now that is a very short period for, I'm not sure why that period was put there. But then the last slide and the thank you note that the presenter said that all of this, I mean, I think the second last slide was this period until May or April 2022. Was that for putting more strategies that the HET wanted to add to that list that they said that are prioritized? That is problematic to me. What does that timeline applies to? And then in her thank you note, she said all of this that she has said is from now till 2030. So once again, we have a timeline of 10 years in which the DHET and government wants to implement all that we already know should have been implemented 10 years ago. And there were many of these presentations that put a timeline, and that is very problematic for me. Why do government need 10 years till 2030 to implement these strategies? There are many people, academics, NPOs that can take each strategy and take 2 years, and all the 20 strategies that has been proposed can be done in 2 years. I mean, infrastructure that differs from curriculum, that differs from professionalization and training. So why does government still need 10 years to implement these strategies? That is very problematic for me. I don't know if someone want to comment and assist me with this idea, but once again, 20 years are given to implement this. That is not on for me. And I think that is also where, as I said, from my side, the activism should come in. This should be a 5-year project, or a 3-year project, because it is not one after the other strategy that needs to be investigated or implemented. It is 10 different strategies that can be implemented in 3 years. So just do something. Government once again gives themselves 10 years to assist, and that is not
acceptable. Yes, so
from my
thanks,
side, actually not negotiable.
Yes, no, I think we share that, and as you pointed out in your comment as well, you know, these are not new issues that they're addressing. Essentially, these are old issues that should have been addressed ages ago. What I would like, Karina, is for you to pop that in an email to me, and then I'm going to forward it to Zelda and see if we can get a response for you on why 10 years as opposed to 3. I know from my perspective, something that just keeps coming up. There's all this pressure on professionalizing the sector, a huge amount of effort going into providing qualifications and SACE accreditation, etc. But what is not being recognized is that the majority of our workforce are in impoverished communities, and therefore these colleagues are not going to be paid for these qualifications that they're acquiring. So unless the government really does step up and provide them with salaries or subsidized salaries or something, at the end of the day, we will still lose valuable people from the sector because they cannot make a basic living. So, you know, that is something that I feel government is really not addressing yet.
Yeah. Yes, yes.
Any other comments from that presentation? Nasima, any thoughts from you as our deputy?
Thank you, Julieta. I just wanted to comment on your previous statement and, you know, in terms of how government is not taking ECD seriously in the country, because especially in relation to the professionalization of the field and, you know, the salary structures. Well, we know that with the Peace Project, we worked tirelessly on professionalizing the field, but it aligns so well with what Eric said. And if you heard closely, I mean, he said that in the professional parties' mandates to the not in the manifesto, sorry, to the local upcoming elections, there was no indication about early childhood education in relation to access, and, you know, so not just access, but I mean the importance of early childhood education for developing a strong citizenry in the country. So I think what you're saying is absolutely important, and what Prof. Mayer has also brought up is highly, highly relevant.
Yeah, agreed. Agreed. Any other thoughts on this topic?
Julieta, just one more point, maybe.
Yes,
It seems
please.
like there's a mismatch here, right? You've got the government, the DBE, taking responsibility for early education workforce. Then you've got a mixed model delivery. So you've got the home-based workforce, and you've got the neighborhood playgroup workforce. You've got the center-based workforce. You've got the healthcare workers. And so, if you privilege the educator workforce, then what it does is it channels the demand in a particular direction. So everyone will want to be an educator and get into REQV 13 and follow that track. And so what happens to the social service professional? So we are paying lip service to a multi-sectoral workforce and then channeling them into education. I mean, I love the fact that education is taking over, because I think their systems are better to handle early learning, and that's the way it should go. But I'm saying that in doing that, what's the blind spot? And how do we then cater for the multiple sectors that the workforce will be deployed in? Or are we saying, let's see what happens in education, then we'll attend to that? Or should it be a parallel process?
Yeah, I'm inclined to feel it has to be a parallel process. I mean, something else that concerns me, and it keeps coming up, it came up in some of our conversations with the Sarisi conference as well, is the bleeding from the diploma in grade R into foundation phase. Now, you might think that's a strange comment for me to make, given that I head up an FP program. So I should be jumping up and down with glee and saying, you know, more students for us. But it deeply concerns me that a huge amount of effort is put into the training of educators specifically for the diploma in grade R. But at the end of the day, that has now become a major route into the FP program. And we have teachers leaving that side of ECE. You know, this is something that is very concerning, and it's still not really being addressed. And part of that is that there are few ways of entering qualifications available to our teachers.
Julieta, can I just say something? I totally agree with you. And what is happening is, because it's a status issue, it's a professional status issue, that if I teach in the foundation phase, I am widely recognized in society as an intellectual, as a professional. But if I teach children from birth to 4, I'm just a babysitter. So there is a big, there is a line of research that is missing on how teacher professional identities influence their professionalization in early childhood. So I think that, you know, that is an area that needs to be looked at in terms of how does the professional, I mean, we know we have the problems with salaries, and as you mentioned earlier, the professionalization in relation to the subsidies, etc., that ECD teachers work in, but in relation to how they construct their professional identities is based a lot on, you know, one would take it as a given, as how they're viewed in society, and a lot of, you know, research needs to be paid, you know, needs to be drawn in that direction as well.
Definitely, and I think it's going to be even more of an issue in the ECCE diplomas. You know, if we're already experiencing it in the diploma in grade R, I think we can assume it'll be more of a problem even in the birth to 4. And I think that's partly why there's been some hesitancy by the training institutions to pick up the new qualification. So, you know, there are big issues around even this concept of professionalization, what that really means, and how it links to quality, and what are the best things to do. Because Nasima, I think you're absolutely right. The teacher's identity is a huge issue. And here we use the term teacher in its broadest sense. And I include here those teachers that don't necessarily have the formal qualifications, but are actually doing the work on the ground. So I think there's definitely a huge space for research to happen.
Yeah, and therefore, you know, the scholarly work needs to be really enhanced. We need to be a powerhouse for research in early childhood care and education. There is a lot of research that's focusing from grade R to 9, and that basically covers, the ECD spectrum covers birth to 9, but there needs to be you know, really forthgoing research on early childhood care and education, and that's where the scholarly work is lacking.
Yes, and our teachers need to want to do that qualification. They need to see the value in acquiring that qualification beyond it being just a bureaucratic requirement. Colleagues, thank you for this discussion. We are now going to join the next link where one of our colleagues, Linda Bosman, is going to share with you about the SIGs and the RIGs and the concept we'd like to put forward as SARISI. So see you in a few minutes for Linda Bosman's presentation. Thank you so much.